Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, 3 Key Ways Independent Restaurants Can Win in 2023, presented by Restaurant Business and Nestle Professional. I'm Abbey Lewis. I am the Vice President of Content Strategy here at Winsight, and I will be your moderator for today's event. Throughout our presentation, we encourage you to interact with our speaker by clicking the Q&A header in the chat box on your screen. We will answer questions live throughout the presentation. Should we not get to your question during the event, a member of the team will respond to you offline after the webinar has ended. We are also recording today's session and will email you as soon as the recording is available. If you are experiencing any technical issues, please use the help button at the top right of your screen. Our speakers today are Miele, the President and CEO of Nestle Professional. Perry is a dynamic and passionate member of the food service community and is proud to lead a world-class team of food service professionals who all share the Nestle commitment to excellence. And George Montagu-Brown, he's the founder of Nomoo Restaurant. George is a plant-based food advocate and entrepreneur from the United Kingdom. Previously the founder of Profit Master, GDMB, and other digital learning companies, George is now the founder of Nomoo, a 100% plant-based burger restaurant in Los Angeles. And Kathryn Fenner, principal at Technomic. Kathryn is responsible for managing and executing strategic research and consulting programs for manufacturers, restaurant operators, and trade associations throughout the food service industry. I'm going to turn it over now to Kathryn, who's going to be kicking off today's presentation. Take it away, Kathryn.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We're so excited to have you here to talk about all the different ways that independents can be excited about 2023 and what you can do to win. Let's go ahead and start by talking about where we are today, just briefly. I want to, cover some of the challenges that we're facing, but despite all the challenges, we still have a lot of reasons to be really excited and optimistic about what is to come. So first, I'm excited because we're here to talk about independent restaurants, and at roughly 2/3 of all the restaurant units in the food service industry, independent restaurants truly are the heart of food service. And that's why I'm excited to be here talking about it. And that's, why consumers are coming back now that the pandemic is beginning to subside. Independent restaurants are the heart of the communities that they exist in. And things are looking good. I mean, we see recovery happening after the pandemic, with independent and small chains growing only about 0.5 point in 2022. But this is real growth. This doesn't include inflation. So it shows us that just in terms of consumers returning, units opening up, we're seeing growth. And then in 2023, I'm happy to be able to say that we see that growth accelerating, with consumers continuing to come back even more so into the independent restaurant space. Now, I can't talk about food service right now, obviously, without talking about kind of that 800-pound gorilla in the room, right? We all know inflation has been out of control. The rate of inflation, however, at home has been even higher than we've seen in food service. So what that tells us is that the gap between what people are paying to make food at home and the gap that they're for the food that they're paying to enjoy away from home is getting smaller, which is a good news for the value proposition that food service offers. It also is beginning to slow. So we're happy to report that while we have seen some historically high levels of inflation over the last few months, we're beginning to see it come down little by little, month by month. So hopefully it will, get to more historically normal levels over the next few months. But despite all of the increases in inflation that we're seeing, consumer confidence is still growing. Consumers still feel good about where we are. Obviously, there was a big drop when the pandemic hit, and there was a lot of uncertainty, and consumers weren't sure, what their employment status was going to be. And so we saw some pretty big drops, but it's come back. We've made it through the pandemic. People maybe have done some job switching. They did some saving during the pandemic, and so they're actually feeling really good. Now, it's not up to the levels that we were at pre-pandemic, but the fact that it's coming back is something for us to feel good about, because when people feel good about the economy, they're more likely to spend on food service. And in the past, when we saw high levels of inflation or we saw recessions occurring, we would have seen consumers behaving in some fairly predictable ways. We saw them trade down from high-end dining to casual dining, or maybe from casual dining to quick service experiences. They would order fewer extras when they did dine out. They were ordering fewer appetizers or desserts, as an example. And they would seek deals. They'd look for coupons, they'd look for value meals, etc. That's what we've historically seen if we look over decades in the food service industry. But that's not what we're seeing today. We're not seeing that trade down occur. We are not seeing people cut out extras, but we are seeing them continue to look for value. And I'm going to talk about what that means to consumers today. We are also seeing that they're cutting the frequency with which they dine out. So they're not dining out as often, but when they do dine out, they want those experiences to really mean something and to really enjoy it. And despite the fact that inflation has been growing, we actually have seen since that happened that people have become less price sensitive. There's an expectation that I'm going to have to pay a little bit more when I go out to eat right now, and I'm okay with it. So what we see, and we've been tracking this for over 10 years, what we see happening is a gradual decline in the total number of consumers who say that they're concerned with price when they dine out. Now, we're not going to kid ourselves. Price is always going to be important, but importantly, they are less price sensitive than they were. It's more about the value of the experience than the affordability of the experience. And we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up. I also mentioned they're not cutting out extras. And you see that here. The average number of items that a consumer orders on their recent full service restaurant occasion or limited service restaurant occasion has not changed since Q4 of 2021, despite these really high levels of inflation that we've seen occurring over the last, call it 12 months. So it's unchanged. People are ordering just as many items when they go out as they used to. They're still ordering dessert. They're still ordering appetizers, as an example. And not only are they not slowing down on that from a year ago, but it's actually higher than it was 2 years ago. So thanks to all that pent up demand from people not being able to get out during the pandemic, and the fact that they're not eating out quite as often, when they do go out, they're ordering more than they would have prior to the pandemic when they go out. So they're not buying food away from home quite as frequently. But when they do, they want it to be special, they want it to be premium quality, and they want it to be memorable. So that's where we're going to spend the rest of our time today. We're going to talk about the 3 key ways that independent restaurants can win in 2023. We've identified 3 major areas, and we're going to talk about each with you today. And George and Perry are going to help provide some context and some great examples of how you can do it. So the first one we'll talk about is exceeding expectations. So consumers expect really great experiences. Well, what does that mean, and how can you deliver it? Then we'll talk about the fact that we're in some resource constrained places. You may have to do more with less labor, fewer ingredients because of supply chain challenges, etc. How can you do that effectively? And then finally, how can you build your off-premise, as that continues to be important to consumers? So first, exceeding those new consumer expectations, both from an occasion perspective and a day part perspective. We've already talked a little bit about that affordability piece, but I really want to drive home that if you're looking to meet consumer expectations, right now that is all about providing value. It's not about affordability necessarily, it's about value. And when it comes to value, you want to think about craveability. That's what's going to help make an experience really special. So we looked at the ratings we have tracked for years among thousands of consumers the ratings of various chain brands so that we can see how attitudes are changing and behaviors. And what we see is that for the chain brands that are very high, they score highly for value, also score very highly for craveability. They do not, however, score highly for affordability. So maybe worrying a little bit less about the price point on your menu and thinking more about how to make that really craveable food that someone can't wait to come in and try. So what is craveable today? Once again, we looked at our database of thousands of menu items and thousands of limited time offers. And we looked at consumer scores to understand what is being rated most craveable today. And we see some common themes. We see Southern comfort, that ever popular fried chicken, shrimp and grits, various different types of Southern flavors are trending on the menu. Creamy sauces. So you're seeing a lot of comfort food and a lot of indulgence cropping up here. We're also seeing unique pizzas. What makes them unique? Well, it might be an unexpected ingredient or topping, or it might just be that it's a little bit more premium versions of the ingredients that you might have seen in the past. We're seeing a lot of fruit flavors and citrus flavors, particularly in beverages, but honestly, we're seeing them across the menu. And part of that is people really are craving sweetness, but that sweetness with the health halo that comes from fruit and from citrus. And then finally, upscale ingredients. So people are looking not just for that beef, but that Angus beef as an example. So just a higher level or more premium quality level of the ingredients that they enjoy. And you can't forget millennials are in a life stage right now where many of them have families. And so when you're thinking about how to meet or exceed consumer expectations, make sure you don't forget about the kids. Millennials are in a life stage where they are the ones spending the most on food service. So you want to make sure you don't ignore this need. That 59% say it's important that you have something specific for my kids. So don't forget about having a couple of items that can appeal to kids on your menu. And even those kid menu items can be premium or taken up a notch versus what we've seen in the past. In the past, you might have seen traditional mac and cheese. Well, now we're seeing mac and cheese in some really creative and interesting ways, even on kids' menus. With Panera Bread as an example, with a grilled mac and cheese sandwich, and Red Lobster thinking about those older kids who want something a little special with their bacon mac and cheese. Okay, so I'll take a breath now because I really want to allow you to hear from our panelists today. We have, again, Perry from Nestle and George from nomoo, and they're going to talk a little bit about how independent operators can make experiences more premium for consumers. Perry, would you like to start us out?
Sure, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me. You're all good?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, for me, how can independent operators make experiences more premium? And I got a little bit of a balance as an operator prior to being with Nestle. So for me, one key differentiator of any operation, as you all know this, is the level of service, right? I was just in, for dinner a couple weeks ago, and then again in Chicago, and I saw the same thing yesterday. And they're my favorite local restaurants, and I hadn't been there, especially the one in Chicago, for 3 months, and I was surprised how empty the restaurant was. And I asked the server, like, what's going on? Is it quiet? And he basically said, it's the service level that we've been able to give our customers hasn't been as good as it used to be, and that's because of the lack of labor. So that is really, really, really important in how to experience premiumization. So it's not just about the meal. I guess I'm saying it's also about the service, because it starts with the service, and then of course delivering the great food or beverage that you offer. And this is because of the labor crunch we're all seeing. And it's not just happening in restaurants, it's also happening in the manufacturing industry or any type of industry that you see. So the consumers also, unfortunately, is even lowering their expectation. And that's us too, right? Because we're the consumer. So for customers, is really to completely not really look at what can we do, but how can you service the level of service that you can bring to the table. So if the restaurant has 300 seats and you can't service the total restaurant, then unfortunately we're just going to have to scale back and service what you can service. And then a key focus on how you deliver the high quality of service and hospitality is critical again to the overall experience. And don't overlook it, because you're the customer today, the consumer, they know what's going on. So don't try to stretch it, and they're willing to support us. We all know that, but just keep the environment of servicing them and supporting your restaurant as good as you can, and they'll always be loyal to you. So that's a little bit about there. So it's about level of service, how do you manage your labor crunch that we all have, and then really focus in on that quality of service and then delivering it with your menu.
Great. Thank you, Perry. George, can you tell us a little bit about how you make your experience more premium for your guests?
Yeah, and I think so. Building on what Perry was saying there, I think loyalty is really important, and suppose you would begin with the question saying, what is a more premium experience, and there's many facets to that. There's the quality of the food. There is certain ingredients that are perceived as more premium. There's the packaging. There's the cleanliness of the store. There's the service, as Perry went into, and all these factors come together to create, either a great experience or like truly an outstanding experience. And I think when you look at the top chains like In-N-Out or Chick-fil-A, in terms of unit volume, which is something I've studied a lot for nomoo, why I think they're successful is they're able to deliver 100% of what of the experience you expect every time you go to the restaurant. So you get the same friendly service. The restaurants are always really clean. The food's always the same. It's well presented. When we look at other brands, other quick service brands, maybe the food consistency isn't there. Something really easy to make the experience more premium, if you're not going to put lobster mac and cheese on the menu, which, face it, not everyone's going to do,
right,
is packaging, and that's something I'm going to talk about later on when we go into the third part of today. But packaging, redoing your packaging, not just to go, but in store, is a really easy way to suddenly give the guest a new experience, and a lot of independent restaurants don't put very much effort into packaging. They don't have the marketing budgets of large chains, but it doesn't need to be that hard. You can spend $500 on a graphics designer and just get some new, nomoo we're redoing right now, the burger wrappers, the shake, the bags, just so it's a fresh color, and that alone can give a more premium experience, and then obviously the presentation of the food, taking that final 30 seconds when it's on the line to make sure it looks well, empowering the cooks, empowering the servers running the food to actually check and make sure that, so there's two checkpoints where it's like, oh, well, was that well presented? Is there fries all over the tray, or are they neatly in the basket? All of that stuff comes together to help as well, make it more premium.
Totally agree. And yes, we're definitely going to talk some more about that coming up. So thank you for that. Next, I want to talk about day parts, because that's certainly, the expectations that consumers have coming into various day parts are going to be different. And this is a little bit more for the full service operators that we have joining us today. But when we asked consumers where they prefer to go for weekend brunch or weeknight dinner, they told us full service. And what we found is, when it comes to full service brunch, dinner, where people want to really spend a little bit more time relaxing and enjoying the company of others, that's where full service really wins. It comes down to that service and experience that Perry was talking about. And in fact, when we project out to what we think is happening within the full service restaurant occasion, what we see is that breakfast is going to play a little bit more of a role, especially on the weekends when people have time, and dinner. But what is happening is it's squeezing lunch a little bit. Where's lunch going? It's going to the limited service restaurants. It's going to your quick service operators who excel in that convenience area. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But what I want to impress upon you is if you're trying to really focus on some of these areas or add some of these areas to your operation, you don't have to completely reinvent yourself. You can, in fact, build up these day parts with signature ingredients that you already have on your menu, so that you are staying, relatively simple from an operational perspective. You're not adding a lot of operational complexity, and you're also staying very true to who you are and what your customers love you for. So here's an example. This is honey butter fried chicken out of Chicago. And this particular restaurant added brunch to their repertoire, and they did it by taking their signature ingredients and presenting them in just a few simple ways for the brunch day part. So they took their fan favorite chicken sandwich as an example, but you can brunchify it by adding an egg and swapping out the bun for a biscuit. And then they added a Bloody Mary, as you can see here, and still managed to include that signature honey butter fried chicken that they are known for. So you don't have to come out with a, all-inclusive brunch menu, but finding a few simple ways to deliver what you're really good at in new day parts could be very exciting for your for those folks that are already loyal to your brand. So I'm going to bring our panel back here. George, I'm going to start with you this time. Can you talk a little bit about capturing breakfast and dinner?
Yeah, I would love to. I think that it was interesting for me to see, that on the last slide, I'm learning stuff too here, which is awesome. So I think that, in QSR, what I see is, and in fast casual as well, it's hard to capture that dinner guest, because they're looking for a more full service experience. They're looking for, speaking with some titans in the industry, I've had the pleasure of having access to, alcohols that can be a component of that. Something we're doing at nomoo now is, again, I can only share from my own experience, is we are adding kind of like a beer and wine license. So that will give a lot of guests more reason to come at night. But I think from a quick service, fast casual perspective, dinner is really to go. That's kind of, especially if you're doing burgers, especially if you're doing pizzas, it's people, guests hanging out at home on the couch on a Sunday night or a Friday night in. And that's where you're going to be doing most of your business. I'd say lunchtime is definitely a lot of dine-in, but dinner, people are, we do most of our business is to go. So I think that, capturing that, there's another item we do. You can do little items. So at nomoo, we do a breakfast sandwich, and it's just an all-day breakfast sandwich that people can order online and in store. That helps, so again, little items like that. I love the item that was shown there of a mimosa with the piece of fried chicken. I mean, that's just so simple and so smart. You definitely don't have to reinvent the menu.
Right.
In our case, it was very easy to add a sandwich. It took, about a week in development, testing it a few different ways, and then boom, we had a breakfast sandwich. It's a lot of times it's just a case of just committing to doing it and then just spending a few days and then adding that item, and it's been a really popular seller, especially on the weekends.
Yeah. And I love that you were able to do it in an all day way, right? In an item that appeals, whether your breakfast is at 10 a.m. or at noon, depending on when you get up, right? Or when you like your breakfast flavors.
100%.
Thank you, George. Perry, would you like to tell us a little bit about how you think restaurants can capture these day parts?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for me, it's always, I look at I look through the lens of three keywords for me always, and we've been talking about this through the presentation, and George has alluded to as well. It's quality, premiumization, and then execution. And each segment, whether you're full service or independent or QSR, it's always about that. So you have different levels of premiumization. So if I break it down to your question on breakfast, it's speed of service, right? That falls into that. And for me, it's critical and important to grow those breakfast sales, right? This is especially true for our independent operators out there, and you know this, and also for fast casual and the quick services segments. This is where the guests have a limited time to make up their purchase and get to their jobs or wherever they're going. And this is, also with George and nomoo, where they're winning in regards to be able to pick up, take out and go. And with that comes order accuracy, right? So you need to ensure that the accuracy of that order also is taken into the order, because it's very important to avoiding frustrating customers. And then lastly, the breakfast items created by independent operators. And sometimes I say a lot of the innovation is created by the independent operators. And then it has to easily be transported to allow that guest to consume them on the go or in the car. And then this goes the same for dinner. Guests have more time versus the breakfast time and are more willing to experiment than at breakfast. But to support this, operators should also offer well-accepted items that are comforting, as well as new menu items that are familiar, but with small changes. This allows for safe experimentation, or what is often what I call familiar with a twist. And that allows you to offer different things that are really built from your pantry that you already have. And then the quality of ingredients, as I said earlier, the quality, and that's also part of premiumization. And then how do you execute it, right? With consistent execution of the menu, it's always, what I call must-have elements of successful operators to have part of the dinner day parts or any day part throughout the day, but also the need to have things that are craveable, as the customers tend to come in for those same menu items, and they don't really get typically in other establishments. But at the end, you have to show craveability, which is part of also premiumization, the quality of that dish or drink, as you saw earlier in the earlier slides, and making it feel like it's always innovating, but yet using your pantry that you have to be more effective. Also, because we talked about that labor crunch and be able to deliver at this time in the moment of our industry that is being affected in every which way at the moment. So a little bit, I said a lot there, but it's still always about focus and what you want to do and what you want to deliver to and what you're good at.
And I think you touched on something really important in there, Perry. You talked about the fact that you want it to be something craveable, but also really unique, right? And that's important. People are looking for things that are, even when they're looking for comfort foods, they don't want it to be presented in the same way that they would enjoy it at home. They want something
like you said
unique.
earlier, right? You said earlier, like a mac and cheese. It could be a base. It could be actual dish. It could be base of a dish. You can add, from crab to lobster to spices, to spice it up.
You want to add an ingredient that maybe they don't have in their pantry at home.
Exactly.
So that they can have it, experience it in a new way.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you. Next, we're going to talk about doing more with less, because we have to acknowledge the fact that we are all resource constrained. And we've touched earlier on the fact that there's still a labor issue. It's tough to find and recruit skilled labor. It's tough to get the ingredients you need sometimes from a supply chain perspective. There are a lot of different challenges that operators are facing. And so you might be forced to do even more, trying to do brunch, trying to do off-premise plus on-premise. You're doing all these new things, but you're doing it with fewer resources. So we wanted to share some thoughts about how you can do that, some strategies. So first, there's a lot of talk about robots right now. So I can't ignore that. Lots of fun pictures as you're flipping through magazines of different technology that's out there. But I want to make sure that you understand that while there is a lot of buzz around robots, that's not necessarily where you need to go. A lot of people probably can't go there and can't invest in that way, but you don't need to. First of all, this one shown here, this was Chili's Rita, their robot that would bring the food to your table. I will tell you that was recently discontinued. So while there was a lot of buzz about it when it came out, they have stopped using it just in, I believe, in the last month that was announced. And then we've also seen companies like Chowbotics. DoorDash owns Chowbotics, and they announced earlier this year that they would cease their Sally the salad maker. So this was something that made a big splash when it came out, a robot that made a salad based on what you pushed in for the ingredients that you wanted. That has been discontinued. So, while there's a lot of buzz around technology, we have to figure out how to use them in a way that enhances the experience for consumers rather than takes away. And the reality is that even tech-savvy younger consumers still are looking for the personal touch. They still want traditional service. So we asked different generations whether they prefer having food and beverage served by restaurant staff versus technology versus robots. And absolutely, even Gen Z and millennials, who are that tech-savvy group and digital natives who grew up with technology, they still want the personal touch. They still want traditional service. And when we look at the main reason that consumers tell us they choose one segment over another, when it comes to full service, it's all about that experience. And Perry touched on that earlier with the importance of service and really, a high level of service. And then when it comes to limited service, it's about convenience. But the convenience, once again, really does exist to enhance the experience. Because whether they're grabbing lunch to take it somewhere else, or whether you're going to sit down and enjoy it within the restaurant, they want the actual experience or transaction to be fast, so that they can and easy, so they can spend time enjoying the food or enjoying the people that they're with, or getting to whatever that next activity is. So whether you're talking convenience or high service levels, it really does still come down to delivering that really smooth, pleasant experience for the consumer. And so you want to think about technology not as how can we replace people, but how can we have technology enhance the experience, whether it's order ahead or whether it's paying for your bill with technology, so that your staff can spend their time, instead of maybe working at the register, they can spend that time instead providing that really high level of interaction and service with the consumer. Now, not everybody can invest in that back of house technology. So what are some other things you can do to boost experience and speed and make that a better experience for your consumer? Think about ease of execution. So there's a few ways you can do that. The first is fewer complex offerings. I think a lot of us fall into that trap of more, bigger, better. And that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes the most simple offerings are the best. And so, take those signature ingredients, don't lose them, but make sure you're offering them in a way that doesn't take a lot of steps to prepare, perhaps. Or maybe you have fewer options, but options that still highlight those favorite ingredients, so that you're not asking the staff behind, in the back of house to know how to make 30 different things. They know how to make 12 different things, but they can do it really well. More value-added prep. Are there ingredients that can take some of the unsafe or less pleasant jobs away from your staff because they're pre-cut, as an example? So ingredients that can help speed the production of foods without taking away from the quality of the ingredients or the freshness of the ingredients. High yield products. What do we mean by that? We mean like the example we showed with honey butter fried chicken, an ingredient that can help you in many different areas of your menu. It can work in the breakfast applications. It can work in lunch. It can work in dinner. It can work in a bowl application or in a sandwich, or, a variety of different ways. It's flexible. And then easy to source ingredients. Are you consistently having trouble getting one ingredient, so you have disappointed customers? What can you do to replace that with an ingredient that is going to be more consistently available, so that you don't have those disappointed customers? So those are just some of the simple ways that you can execute more efficiently so that you are enhancing the ultimate customer experience. And let's look at a few examples here. The Kebab Shop. This is a local chain out of San Diego. And what they tell us is that they feature fresh toppings and sauces in wraps, salads, and customizable plates. And when you look at the picture that they feature here on their website, you can see a lot of really exciting looking menu items here. But the key to it is there's actually only a small number of ingredients, but they're combined in some, a variety of different and exciting ways. And they all are fresh. And if someone prefers chicken to steak, that's an easy swap you can make. There are easy swaps via the sauces that are added at the end, but the core ingredients are largely the same, which simplifies the execution, reduces the chances of mishaps or missed orders, and speeds the execution ultimately. Now, here's a full-service restaurant. This is Dirt Candy out of New York City. This is an all-vegetable restaurant. They strive to make vegetables delicious. They even say on their website, we're not about making you healthier. We're about making vegetables craveable. And what they have done is they make sure that they design their recipes in such a way that they can easily swap one vegetable for another, so that if something doesn't show up on the truck that day, they still have options. And so just by making sure your staff understands some of those easy swaps, that's one way that you can overcome some of these supply chain issues and make for really great experiences for your guests ultimately. Okay, so that brings us back to our panel. Perry, I'm going to start with you this time. Can you talk a little bit more about how independent operators can do more and achieve all the things they need to do with fewer resources?
Well, I'm going to start, Kathryn, by saying, you were spot on with everything. It's going to be tough for George and I to add any more to that. But, for me, the most important way that we can save, because I'm just going to add a few more words to that, save time, money, and labor, is to have a pantry that is more versatile. Everything you were just talking about. And that's through multiple application and really high versatile core products. That is going to be key on your menu. An example might be a base sauce that has a neutral flavor profile, or a tomato sauce, a cheese sauce, or a white sauce. These are all good examples where you can build up different flavors. But these sauces can be also used in many applications, as you just alluded to from those examples, by making small changes to the profile of those dishes, which then could be called something else, and also including fresh herbs or cooked onions and spices and aromatics and base sauces, and this all then changes the flavor and the appearances and allows it to be then added to other parts of the menu. This is something that we have a close look at with a lot of our operators that we partner with in service. So, and it's even more beneficial when the operator uses only ingredients that they already have in their kitchens, and then make these ingredients in a different way to come up with different flavors for the dishes that they have, which makes it more versatile. And then it's always important for the operators to occasionally assess where the value-added ingredients could be used to support their labor hours without affecting the integrity of the dish. So for example, the consumer will never know whether a poblano sauce was made fresh with the roasted chilies, or did they use a poblano concentrate to help with that quality and consistency of that sauce. So there's many ways that you can do this, but that's a little bit of my view on how to do more with less.
That's great. Great suggestions. Thank you, Perry. George, what are some of the things that you've found work for you in your operation?
Yeah, would love to share. So I had a question from Brian Baxter I thought I would address as well, because I think it's relevant to this.
Great.
Goes into the experience of a restaurant, and it's about secret menu items, and how do they work to kind of you know, that graph we looked at, you know, it clearly had the ways to win is really convenience and experience, you know. So I think part of that experience is guests. Something we do on at nomoo is on Instagram we have you know, certain menu items that are not on the menu, and actually the breakfast sandwich that I aforementioned is not actually on the menu. You can order it, but you know, through third-party apps to go, but it's not actually on the menu at the restaurant. But people know about it because they've had it before. They've seen the photos on Instagram. You know, they see this kind of the dripping cheese and all this type of stuff. So I think having a secret menu is a very easy way to do more with less, because you know you're effectively, you're just adding this element of fun, you know. So
Yeah.
I think that you know, John Taffer had this wonderful quote that was, reactions create transactions, right? So, you know, if you think about when you go into a restaurant, you know, it's the sum of a series of experiences that improve the experience by a couple of percent, you know. So whether it's a smile as you walk in, it's the presentation of the food, it's hearing about some weird item or seeing a guest eat it that's not on the menu, and you're saying you've been here 3 times and you're thinking, well, what's that? You know, it's all creates part of this experience. And you know, on an economical side, I think that, you know, we're lucky at nomoo that we have a relatively small menu, you know, which allows us to use many ingredients many times over and over again, right? And that's a huge part of, you know, of savings for us, and savings in labor. And so I think that, you know, as Perry rightly said, you know, nobody's going to know whether you use fresh peppers. No guest is ever going to ask you that, you know.
Right.
It's just, you know, what is the end result? You know, is it a soup that's 99% the same as, you know, if it was made with the fresh peppers? If it is, then, you know, it could be a great change to make, because then you can focus those funds somewhere else. You know, like I said earlier, on packaging, on things like that. You know, the consumer does see that impacts them a lot more than you might even think. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to do it.
That's wonderful. Love that suggestion. And, you know, thanks for sharing those. I think, let's see. Next, we are talking about off-premise and how you can have off-premise help build revenue streams for your operation. So first, why are we talking about that? Well, the first thing is, the reality is we saw an elevated level of off-premise because it was necessary during the pandemic. But now that things have sort of leveled out a little bit, and we see people coming back into restaurants again, we see that a higher level of off-premise is here to stay. To some extent, it's because restaurants figured out how to do it, and it's a new potential revenue stream for them. And to some extent, it's that consumers have decided they like being able to take their food to wherever they're going and make those home meals easier, right? I can sit and enjoy the meal because I picked it up on my way home instead of having to sit in the kitchen and make it. So while we've seen in-store obviously bounce back, we see that the level of pickup and delivery is quite a bit higher than it was pre-pandemic. So January of 2020 was at 15%. It's at 24% now. And we believe that's about where it's going to stay. So opportunity to serve your customers both in the restaurant and off-premise is going to remain. So let's look at how some restaurants have done this effectively. First, we have an example from Daly City, California. This is Original Joe's. And this is a restaurant, an Italian restaurant, that found a way to do off-premise when they hadn't done it before the pandemic started. So first, they use a downsized menu. That's really critical. Make sure you understand what on your menu delivers well or can travel well and what doesn't. You don't have to offer the entire menu for off-premise occasions. A lot of restaurants have found they can successfully have an abbreviated version, and customers understand it and understand why it's being done, because ultimately what they care about is the quality of the food that they get to enjoy. They also added a grab and go market. So this speaks to whether or not you can make it even easier or more convenient for consumers to use your food for off-premise by having maybe an open air cooler where they can, or a refrigerator case where they can run in and grab some of these pre-made items without having to plan ahead of time. And then finally, they're doing curbside. So they're not doing delivery where there's potentially a lot of additional costs being added on, but they're still successfully reaching a new audience through off-premise. Next, let's talk about the types of products I mentioned. You don't have to have a full menu. Well, what's something we see exploding on menus right now because it is the right, it does deliver so well, are bowl meals. So this is where you can take existing ingredients within your pantry and combine them in a variety of different ways. And bowls are absolutely exploding on our menus when we look at growth of different types of applications. And the reason for it is it's relatively simple to prep. It's one dish, so it travels well and it doesn't use a lot of packaging. And it also is usually very customizable. So the consumer can have a different bowl every time by switching up what ingredients they want in it, what sauces or what seasonings or what flavors they're including from one experience to the other. So it hits a lot of really beneficial points for operators as well as for consumers. Now, when we talk about off-premise, though, we want you to understand there's lots of opportunity there if you choose to deliver. There's lots of opportunity out there if you choose to do curbside or takeout. Curbside and takeout is where we've seen a lot of the growth over the last few months. And delivery, while it can get you to a new consumer, can be tricky. And so we encourage operators to really think carefully before embarking on delivery. There's extra costs, obviously, that are involved, and it's harder to control the quality of the food between when it leaves your shop and when it gets to the consumer ultimately. And the problem with that is when consumers order delivery through a third-party delivery company and they have a less than ideal experience, it's the restaurant that gets the blame rather than the third-party delivery company in most cases. And so you want to think about that because this is your reputation that's at stake, and you want to have this be a way to continue your relationships and grow new relationships. You don't want it to destroy relationships with your loyal followers. And so, you might determine that the opportunity to delivery is really just more an opportunity for off-premise. And you can do that through takeout, curbside pickup, or drive-through if that's feasible for you. Because ultimately, it's the quality of the food that matters. So you want to choose the method that you can excel in. Okay, and now I'm going to bring George and Perry back in. George, I'll start with you this time. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your thoughts on how to effectively deliver or build off-premise business?
Yes, I can, and actually, I would love to share hopefully some golden nuggets on this. So, let's talk about how not to do it. I think how not to do it is to just offer kind of the same experience as everybody else, right? It's really easy for a restaurant to offer just the same packaging as everybody else, the black box, the brown, eco box,
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to differentiate yourself. And can an independent restaurant create, custom packaging? yes, they can. We did it at nomoo. We only have one location. We work with a packaging provider, and we were able to we just created a new meal box, and it's 50 cents a box, and it's double printed on the interior and exterior of the box. It's really colorful. It's really cool. You can afford 50 cents a box. You know what I mean? I think that the packaging is a really big deal. And because that is the experience essentially. So when someone comes to the store, they get the cleanliness, right? They get the cleanliness, they get the friendliness, they get the whole experience. We just saw how important experience was in that great graph that was shared. In to go, the only experience is the packaging. Obviously there's food, but other than that, it's the packaging. So the packaging is really important. So differentiate yourself. That's what we've started to do at nomoo, and that's what we are kind of in process of doing at the moment. You can't afford to just be the same. The next way to differentiate is to offer an actual experience, okay, not just a la carte items. So that's something that we are now starting to do. Is we are at the very top when you order on Postmates. There's meals, there's experiences there. The restaurants that do best for third party here in Los Angeles are not just saying, there's a pasta restaurant here in Santa Monica, and they offer an experience. They offer a one-person 3-course meal with a dessert, included, and that's $35 or something. That's an experience. It doesn't mean these portions have to be regular size. They can be smaller than a regular main, for example. You don't want to lose money on this experience. But it is an experience, it's not just one item, and the guest has to always kind of fill in their, their kind of their own order every single time, which guests don't want to do. Guests are, lazy. We're all lazy at the best of times. They just want to hit a button, boom, that's it. I'm getting burgers, fries, and a shake. That's it. I press one button, and I know the price. So I think that, it's actually very easy to do this. I would say for nomoo, I've identified it as the easiest, the biggest opportunity for us to grow is via third party, because so many brands are just not doing it very well. They're not putting a lot of effort in. All you need to do is make a box. All you need to do is be aware of how the food tastes. Have you tasted your food, after it's been sitting for 45 minutes? Have you really done that? That's a really important step too. It's critical. I know that this incredible product that nomoo's been luckily enough to develop with Nestle, our proprietary beef, it was testing it, 45 minutes in was really important to us, and obviously it performed great, and it was still really delicious, which is wonderful. But you've got to make sure the food, that's the beef for our plant-based burgers, but you've got to make sure the food tastes good after a certain period of time. That's really critical as well.
Very important. Yeah. And we've heard it can be important too to give advice on how to retherm these products if that might be necessary.
That too, yeah. 100%.
Make sure that best possible quality if they do reheat.
Yeah, a little business card, that goes in the bag that teaches you how to heat it up. And also something else I'll share, because I just feel like these are useful. We have a little card we staple onto the front of the bag now that gives the guests an opportunity to get in touch with the restaurant if they have an issue, instead of going directly to, writing a negative review. So they're encouraged to please get in touch with us first. And they're also encouraged to review us on the third-party apps. So when you get more reviews on the apps, your ranking improves on the apps too. So that's just something else I thought worth sharing.
I thank you for sharing that. Actually, that's a really important point, that you need to have to maintain relationships. Every once in a while, experience isn't going to be perfect, but you want to make sure that you hear about it and have a chance to respond and make it right. So you definitely want to keep those lines of communication open. It's an important point. Thank you, George. Perry, can you talk a little bit about off-premise business?
Sure. And George, spot on. Our whole industry and our food service DNA is face-to-face. The best way to get consumer insights is speak right to them. And even if you're doing a delivery service, the best way to get the customer to talk to you is for them to call you directly. That's spot on. Excellent. This is kind of almost where coming to the end of where we started. And again, I'm saying premiumization, quality, and execution. And as George says, that brings the experience. So the packaging story is just as important as the service in your restaurant with your servers, right? And the food. So, for me, when creating the menus, it's really, really important of the off-premise side of the business, because the person ordering, whether it's pickup or delivery, however which way they're going to get it. I know George one day is going to get drones, dropping down food to your address, but however it gets to you, it's just as important as your service you have in the restaurant, because you don't just want to just hand it over to someone and then they'll dictate how good you are because of the way it was delivered. So this, to me, what I'm saying, I'm not going to get into what travels well, like the soups or braised meats, right? And that fries are even more difficult from a traveling standpoint. But what is important is, as George has been speaking about, is the packaging. It's really important, whether it's 50 cents or 60 cents. If just taking 10 cents out of your packaging to deliver the meal like it would be delivered in your restaurant, and for 10 cents, you're going to allow your business to deteriorate because of packaging. And, innovation comes from us. I'm now speaking, with my operator hat on. It comes from us, and it also comes with you partnering with your suppliers in order to get what you want. This is an area that I don't think we should all just take what's off the shelf. This has to really be innovative. It's great to be on this webinar with independent operators, because for me, the industry innovation, whether it's menu, trends, flavors, and let's get packaging going too, guys. That's where it's going to come from. The innovation is going to come from you. We will always support from a manufacturing side, because packaging is important. And then the other piece is that we also need to recognize how important it is, but also the delicate balance between sustainability, right? And as well as having the right packaging to deliver safe food, right? Food safety, to bring your quality of it. And then there's also what packaging, if you're delivering types of foods that may be needed a little more reheating, you got to have the right packaging. You can't just put it in a paper box and pretend that it can get reheated in the oven or in a microwave and still have the same quality. So this is an area we do a lot with our operators and our partners today to help with their takeout. But because like right now, and I hope it's not always like this, but a majority of the people on the phone today, if you're doing pickup or takeout, I bet you 50% of your business is going out the door or out the back door and not being eaten inside the restaurant. So this is an area that there's a lot of support from your suppliers and manufacturers that can help you. And as George said, you'll even probably have local packaging companies that are small that can help you, and you start to drive the new trend. Don't give in with just what's on the shelf through your distributor that's offering, packaging from various packaging companies with the same thing, right? So packaging is very important. And then over time is how do we balance sustainability? One key point too in trend, that we hear from Kathryn as well, what the consumer is saying, is they're really looking at quality and the safety of food before sustainability, even though they want sustainability. But let's start with quality food safe products. And then that'll help you get to better sustainable packaging that the packaging companies also need to work at in regards to keeping our planet clean and with packaging that can be reused.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Perry. And another point that I will add to that is the fact that it's interesting when, sustainability remains important to people, but when we ask about different issues right now, actually social justice is beginning to be important to them. And the reason I say that is because when we ask them, well, what do you mean by social justice? What do you want to see restaurants doing? The number one thing is I want to see them treating their employees really well.
Right.
So, you know, we tend to think, oh, social justice, they want you to take a stand on this issue or that issue, and that can be really scary. It doesn't have to be that. You can, you know, show that you care about the community just by really treating your employees well, making sure that, you know, they have whatever benefits they need or whatever hours off they need, and, you know, just being a good employer.
Right.
That goes a long way.
Right. I want to close off with what you're saying is that so we need to have a total package to stick with packaging, and you know, our industry is not alone. We win together as an industry, and just by these webinars and the connectivity that we have within the industry. And I just want to put a plug for IFMA, the International Food Manufacturers Association. We do a lot of work of everything you're saying, Kathryn, to help support our independent operators as well, because sometimes they're majority of the time they're overlooked. I come from a small independent family, yes, at Nestle now, but this is something that we continue to drive at IFMA to help support. So you're not alone, and there's a lot that the industry can do to help you as well.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you both so much for all your great insights today. I know I learned a lot, and we appreciate you for joining us as well.
Yes, again, thank you so very much, Perry, George, and Kathryn. It's been just a wonderful presentation. Again, many, many thanks. If there were any questions we were unable to address during the presentation, they will be answered by a member of our team after the webinar is ended. And with that, that concludes our webinar. On behalf of our sponsor, Nestle Professional, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you have a great day.